Okay, I'm going to get started now. Welcome to day 3 of MIX. Good to see so many of you guys here today for such an early session. Hope you've been having a good conference. As Steve Ballmer said in yesterday's Q&A, SharePoint's a key product for Microsoft. They've built it into the core OS. They've provided integration, deep integration with their Office client suite. And they've provided a core platform for building rich internet applications. Now, traditionally, that's been document management, collaboration, that kind of thing. But it's moving more into providing really big intranet and public-facing websites for enterprise solutions. And in the future, it's moving, from now and going forward, it's moving into really rich social networking in the enterprise. So quite a lot of you may or may not be familiar with the capabilities around the intranet scenarios for SharePoint. What I'm going to be talking today about is the capabilities around web content management. So to introduce myself, I'm Ben Robb. I'm a MVP for SharePoint. I'm also CTO of a UK-based gold partner called Seascape, and we're basically a system integrator. What I'd really like you guys to get out of this session is an understanding of how flexible SharePoint is, and to show that you can build really highly designed websites using SharePoint. So to start us off, let's do a quick straw poll. How many people here are actually using SharePoint at the moment? That's a lot. Excellent. And how many of you are using it to deploy rich public-facing websites at the moment? Good. I'm glad that number went down. Basically, this session's probably going to be a bit basic for the guys who are already pushing public-facing websites out. It's meant to be an overview of what web content management features and functions there are in SharePoint. But if any of you have more advanced questions that you want to talk to me about, I'm around after the session, so come and find me. I'm also not going to be doing anything too technical. I'm not going to show any code, so that should make the business and design people in the room happy. So just a bit about the agenda. I'm going to introduce HeadCandy, which is the site I'm going to be talking about. HeadCandy is a record label, and we launched a website for them using SharePoint 2007 way back in August 2006, so 6 months before it was a released product. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on basic WCM features, branding, how editors can use the system to create content and manage content, talk a bit about aggregation and reuse and some of the tools around that, and talk about how you can extend the platform using to support user-generated content. The last part of the talk, I'm going to do a slight change of tack and talk to you a bit about something that was announced this week at the SharePoint conference in Seattle, and that's the Silverlight blueprint for SharePoint. So I'm going to show you some examples of how that's used. So Ministry of Sound is the world's biggest independent record label. It's based in London, in the UK. They've got clubs through the world. There are a couple in London and places like Singapore and New Delhi. They're predominantly doing record sales and events, but they also have sort of merchandising and stuff like that as well. And they are the sole owner of HeadCandy, which is one of their sub-brands. So HeadCandy's a house music label. They also do events, and they have a really specific character. They're very design-driven. They have a very distinctive design. So if you pick up any record from the HeadCandy stable, you'll know instantly that it's a HeadCandy record. It has a very funky design. So what drove them to want to create a new website? Well, they acquired HeadCandy about 3 years ago, and they were looking to replace the existing site and consolidate and bring everything into the same thing. They were already MCMS 2002 customers of Microsoft, so the existing Ministry of Sound online assets are all running on MCMS 2002. And they really wanted to prove that SharePoint could deliver the sort of pixel-perfect design requirements, the specialized features that they really wanted, such as video and user-generated content. And they had a really tight time frame to push this round, despite the fact that SharePoint wasn't released until November 2006. In August, in June, they were really looking to launch very quickly. They had some commercial drivers to that. So, why did they choose SharePoint? So, just to give a bit of history on where SharePoint came from, SharePoint 2003 didn't really have good web content management features, so it wasn't an obvious choice. MCMS 2002 did have good web content management features, but didn't have the breadth and depth that an enterprise level system would demand. The client also had prior experience of managing MCMS 2002, so they really wanted something that was going to bring forward their own skills and mean that they weren't in a position where they were getting rid of all of their existing skill sets. So MCMS 2002 was moved into the MCMS team was moved into the SharePoint team in 2003, and all of the web content management features from MCMS were brought into the platform for SharePoint. So the other main reason why they wanted to go with SharePoint at the time was that in the feature versus requirements analysis, it ticked lots of boxes. It had rich web content management. It had good document management and search and blogs and user-generated content and all those things that they wanted. And they knew that they had some future requirements. They wanted to integrate with back-end systems. They've got systems for managing their records, for managing their track lists, for example. And they wanted, in the future, to be able to extend the platform and integrate with those things. And SharePoint offered really compelling features to enable them to do that. And they also wanted to roll it out through their organization. So they were already using SharePoint 2003 as their internal system. And they were getting some disconnect between publishing to their intranet scenario and publishing to their public-facing web assets. By standardizing on a platform across the enterprise for both public-facing and internal applications, they were able to make use of that. So what is web content management in SharePoint 2007? It's a fully featured web content management solution. Well, I would say that. But I'll explain some of those features as we go through, and I'll show you in the demos what sort of features there are. But because it's built on Microsoft SharePoint technology, so Windows SharePoint Services is its foundation, it's on pretty much every server, or it can be on every server in your farm, that raw technology. So because of the commonality of that, you're going to get increased benefits of reduced costs for development, for maintenance, for IT professional training and things like that. So it's very useful. It's built using standard Microsoft tools. It's built on IIS 6, but you can also use it on IIS 7. It's built on SQL Server. And it uses ASP.NET as its primary engine. So it's got all the familiar features that you'd expect from an ASP.NET application. It's got master pages and page layouts. It makes use of the web part framework. It implements provider models like membership and roles, like site maps. So you're leveraging existing technologies. You're leveraging the corpus of technology that the ASP.NET world has. And it also uses some of the other .NET features of .NET 3.5. So it uses Windows Workflow Foundation natively. And because it's part of this bigger product, it can use all the other features of SharePoint. So you're not restricted to just choosing to use the web content management features. You can use everything else. So that's form server, search, info path forms, workflows for business process automation, business intelligence, and all sorts of other features. And it gives you really strong control over your branding. And this was a feature of 2003, that it was very, very, very hard to modify the look and feel of a SharePoint 2003 site. Certainly very hard to do that in a supported way, and certainly not using standard technologies. Because of its templating approach, it's very flexible, but it also enforces your brand. So your content authors, your business users, can't really muck around too much with your design guidelines if that's what you've decided to do when you're building your templates. And most importantly, from HeadCandy's point of view, and I suspect for most of you guys, because MIX is a fairly design-heavy conference, there shouldn't be any limits to the designer's creativity. Anything you can build in ASP.NET, you should be able to build in SharePoint. It's just that SharePoint gives you some additional tools which make life easier. So I'm going to show you a bit of a demo on how branding works within SharePoint. So some of you might be familiar, well, given the number of hands in the room, a lot of you will be familiar with this kind of view. This is a standard SharePoint out of the box, and it's fairly restrictive. It's got a logo in the top left. It's got some management features around here. It's got some content, and it's got some navigation. That might be okay for an intranet site, for a corporate intranet site, for a big company. But certainly for a public-facing website, it's not going to stand up. It's not going to be credible. So they tried, the product team. They gave us some examples of some additional types of pages that you could have. And they built a master page framework around the ASP.NET master page system. And they enabled you to modify which master page is being used by your site. So if I just pick one of these at random and change that, we can see that that's looking a bit better, but it's still quite corporate. It's still not funky enough for real web content management. Too many rectangles, straight sides and stuff. So one of the big steps forward with 2007 Server is freeing you from this very rigid model and enabling you to do something like that with SharePoint. So this is a SharePoint site. It's got, I'm logged in, so I get my Site Actions toolbar. But it doesn't look anything like a SharePoint site. You couldn't tell unless you looked at the underlying source code and looked for some bits of metadata at the top that it was actually a SharePoint site. And it's got some navigation. It's got a search box. It's got some news stories. It's got a music section and some other bits. So really, nothing like a SharePoint site. And you can click around here and see that you've got all sorts of additional bits of functionality around the branding, which makes it quite tight, quite a good, clean design, and proves that you're not restricted by the fact that you've got a SharePoint site. So I'll just switch back. So if you can do all of that with just a standard out-of-the-box ASP.NET site, why would you need to use SharePoint? And the reason is you're on large sites particularly, you're going to want to have some content management functionality that enables business users, not technical people, to put content up onto your site, to manage the information architecture on your site, the site structure. But you want to give them some control over that. You want potentially to have approval workflows kicking off in your news section, so that things that are embargoed aren't published up to the public-facing site before they should be. And you might want to announce something at a certain time. So you want to schedule the release of some content at a particular time. SharePoint has all of these kinds of features built in, so you don't have to write those from scratch. It's also got lots of management tools and interfaces that enable people to manage particularly large sites. So on a site where you've got a couple of hundred pages, it's not going to be a problem keeping track of the status of your site, what's going on in your site. But if you want to build a site where you've got thousands of pages, or tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of pages, you're going to want some utilities to manage those. So the reporting and management tools really become invaluable at that stage. So just to show some of those off, if I go into a page, what we can see here is a toolbar which appears when you're logged in, not when you're not, when you have sufficient privileges on the site to edit pages and publish pages, and when that page is in a draft state. So we can see here we've got a draft version. We can see that the current version of the page is version 8. That exists, it's visible to everyone. I've not set any publishing start dates and end dates on this page, but I could. And I can see the status. And if it was checked out to someone else, I could see who it was checked out to. And I can see what kind of page this is. It's a music release feature page. So just walking through this toolbar, what else have we got? We've got some standard features around checking things out, saving things, deleting the page, managing web parts on this page. We've got the publishing workflow, so we can kickstart that. We can see the current tasks, if there are any, on this particular asset. And we can do various other things. We can do spell checks, we can do preview, what's this going to look like for an anonymous user without all of this stuff at the top. And we can look at version history. So we can see when things changed, why things changed, who changed them. You can see I've been changing them quite a lot in the last 2 days. And we can also obviously edit the page. So that takes us into a slightly different view of the page, but a WYSIWYG view. And in here, we've got different types of control that we can add. We can have just plain URLs, links. We can have pictures which are shown on this page. We can also have pictures which are related to this page, but we don't want to actually show on this page. So these roll-up pictures here are going to be used for content aggregation, and I'll get onto that later. But in terms of editing page content, it's a very familiar model. I can type in text here. I can use the toolbar as I would in Word. I can use shortcut keys in the same way I would in any Windows application. So it provides a very rich interface for your end users to be able to create content quickly, style it within the boundaries that you've set. So you notice I can't set, for example, the font or the colors. That's been removed from this functionality. So that provides really clean data for you to fit into your overall look and feel. So just to talk a bit more about the tools and the editing, the full editing experience, I can check this in, and you notice that the version number has incremented. It's now 8.3, not 8.2. While I was editing that page, no one else could edit that page. It was locked for me, and I didn't have to check that in. I could have just saved it and left it. And at that stage, until you went back and checked in, other people can't edit it. And then finally, I can publish the site, this page. So while it's in this stage, any editors, any authors on your site can view what changes have been made. But the public view of that site is still version 8, the major version of this. So some of the other tools and reports that are useful, obviously on a large site, you're going to have people checking things out, saving them, going to lunch, forgetting that they've checked them out. So there are lots of reports here to find things that have been checked out to me, things that are pending approval if you're using the approval workflows, and various other tasks and documents and reports that you can get here. You can also look at the whole content and structure of the site in a completely non-designed view. So you can see that this page, this site that I'm looking at the moment, has some pages. It's got some track listings. It's got various other things. So this site doesn't actually use the formal publishing workflows. So I'm just going to go back to the site I was showing you before, because this one does have publishing enabled. And I'll show you, workflow enabled. And I'll show you some of the additional features around that. So I've just switched into edit mode on this page in exactly the same way I did on the other site. And I can modify this if I wanted to. And then I submit for approval. Now this takes me to an info path form, which I can modify if I need to. But essentially, it enables me to request that the approvers group approves the page before it gets published. And I can type a message. I can set a due date if I know it's got to go live by a certain date. And I can notify other people. So those other people are not part of your workflow, but they're told that the workflow has started. So if I just start that running. Now I'm logged in as a member of the approval group as well. So I get an email which says that this task has been created for me. But if I come to this page through another mechanism, I quickly get the buttons to approve or reject. So if I go to approve this, I can see the message that that was put into the request, I can type some responses in, and I can either approve or reject it. Or I could reassign the task to someone else. If someone else who's not part of the official approval group, needs to be aware that this task has been done, I can reassign it to someone else. I can also request a change, and an email would go back to the person who submitted the post for approval. So all through this time, the page is live for the authors to see the authoring version, and the members of the public who aren't authors to be seeing the existing version of that page. So it's really strong versioning. And that versioning goes throughout the product. So if you've got images, if you've got documents like PDFs or other assets that you've got, you can apply exactly the same workflows to those assets as well. So that's really useful. Okay. So talking a bit about content aggregation, every area of the SharePoint site has the ability to have RSS feeds applied to that, which makes it very easy to aggregate content to other sites. You can also consume RSS feeds from external sites very easily. There are controls and web parts available to do that. More importantly for you, you're going to want to know that navigation is automatically generated. You don't need to manage that both in the page content and a separate navigation file. The navigation is automatically related to the structure of your site, and that's very useful. And then you also get content roll-up controls, content aggregation controls, which means that you can create pages which are pulling bits of information from your pages, so the description and the title and the links, from other areas of the site, and render that inline in your page. So examples on the Head Candy site of where we're doing that is here. This part of the page is WCM content. We saw we could edit that kind of area of the page. But this area here wasn't. It was flat text that was hard-coded in some way. What that is a web part that consumes from a separate list, which is structured data of the tracks that are on that particular album. And so what this enables you to do is have fairly unstructured content, your WCM content, and really highly structured content in the form of lists with strongly typed lists on the same page seamlessly to the end user. This area here is also using aggregation. It's pulling information like the description and one of the roll-up images onto this page. And we're also using it in the event system as well. This is a user control that consumes XML data that comes back from a query against the content system. So both of these mechanisms are quite useful and quite powerful. I'll just show you some of the features, particularly around navigation. So if I just go back to the root site, because there's more navigation there, it's more interesting. This site actions drop-down list just provides you with shortcuts to useful bits of administrative functionality, one of which is modify navigation. So I said earlier that navigation uses the sitemap provider model that comes with ASP.NET, and this is a way of managing that. So the sitemap provider will crawl the structure of the site and take note of what this kind of admin screen shows you. So you can see that I can hide various bits of the site that I don't want end users seeing. You can see that I've got both a global navigation and a current navigation, which in the case of stuff at the root is the same. I can also decide whether or not I want to show sub-areas and sub-pages within that site in my navigation. Mostly you would want to show pages in your navigation. So just going to the content aggregation again. I was talking about this track list here, which has all of the tracks on the CDs that relate to this particular release. If I edit the page, we can see that this is not editable. I can't go in and change any of this text here. But I can go and edit this via either through this edit button here or I can go directly to the list. So this is just a standard list of from SharePoint, and I can have a look at this and I can see that I've got a title, I've got an artist, a mix, a track number, whether it's a CD or a vinyl recording, and so on. If I edit that, you can see that some of these are drop-down lists, some of these are free text boxes, and some of them are more advanced bits of functionality like URLs. So they're sort of composite controls. And this kind of list, this kind of structured data, can be built to fit whatever kind of data you want to structure in this way. So this is completely extensible. You've got 20 or so field types available to you, but if you don't like those or you want a slightly different user interface onto that, you can absolutely build your own content type, field types for showing on this. Okay, so we'll just go back here. So that's a mechanism for modifying that. Okay. So the final major area of functionality that the site provides is user-generated content. Most of the data that we're collecting is going to be stored in SharePoint lists, just like we've seen. But it's going to be tied to individual user accounts, and those user accounts are going to be stored in the membership provider database. So this is just a standard SQL membership provider database. So if we just have a quick look at that. So here we've got various galleries of pictures that have been taken at Head Candy events, and people can upload those through their profile. They can also provide information about themselves. So in the same way that Facebook has their own pages, anyone can sign up for an account with Head Candy and provide information. And so they can they get their own blog. They can make comments on bits on events and music releases, and they can do fairly standard user-generated content things. And all of this is built using exactly the same way you'd have to do this if you were building a plain ASP.NET site. Okay. So if I just show you one of these lists, how it actually works in the back end. We can see that at the end of the day, this is just a flat list. Because I'm an administrator, I can see all of this. And it's basically a tie-up between the person's name, so a user, the comment that they've made, when it was created, and the URL that it applies to. So it's a very simple linking system with that. And we can also see we've got the same functionality here. So I can add an event here, a comment here. I'm logged in. That will be recorded against the SharePoint list. Okay. So there's a bunch of other features that we're not using very much. We've used search, but I've not got that configured on my server. We could use document management. We could use records management, but it's not really appropriate in a web content management scenario. Certainly not for this client. Line of business integration. We are actually using some line of business integration, which is, well, we're in development on that at the moment. What we're doing is, Ministry of Sound have a digital asset management system that they want to automatically draw information out of. So for that track listing control, instead of that information coming from a local SharePoint list, what it will come from in the future is a line of business application that we're working with. So we can consume any information from any data source and treat it within SharePoint as if it was natively within SharePoint. We can consume web services, we can consume ODBC connections, and we can bring information in from all sorts of places. We're also looking to roll all of the Ministry of Sound online assets. They've got 20 or so sites onto SharePoint as a standardized platform. And when they do that, what that will enable them to do is share information between those sites very, very easily. So when a news story goes live on the Head Candy site, it can be tagged to go also live at the same time with the same content on the main Ministry of Sound site. So that's going to be very, very interesting. And they're also looking to start using more rich user experience techniques, both for the end user experience, but also particularly for the authoring experience. So this is where the techniques that we're really talking about at this conference are going to start coming into their own. And we're looking to start using Silverlight throughout the site in the next couple of months. Which brings us to the Silverlight blueprint for SharePoint. So this was a project that was started last year. It's a Microsoft project which has been worked on by a number of MVPs and members of the product team. And it's providing a jump start for SharePoint developers to start using Silverlight within their applications. Silverlight is its own fantastic technology in one corner, SharePoint is a good technology in another corner, and it's quite difficult to see how you would integrate those two. So the blueprint provides really rich information, guidance on how you go about doing that, and starts to showcase a number of different techniques, which I'll show you in a demo. This is currently live. There's a site, www.ssblueprints.net/SharePoint. And that has a whole collection of things. In fact, I'll show you the site. I'll show you the site here. I'll just quickly show you the site. Okay, so this provides training kits, resources, sample code, video of how to install it, how to use it, and also the full solution packages. So this is live. This is available. You can go off and see this right now. So what comes out of it? There are 7 key samples that are part of this release. There's a sort of getting started guide, which is basically a hello world in both Silverlight 1 and Silverlight 2. And then there's a Silverlight web part. And that Silverlight web part enables you to drop onto any SharePoint page a Silverlight application. Basically, you choose the ZAP file that you want to consume, and that's instantly embedded into your SharePoint site. So that's the quickest and dirtiest way of getting Silverlight applications up onto a SharePoint site. But there are more complex scenarios that the blueprint addresses. And these are really important for producing dynamic Silverlight applications which consume and make use of SharePoint information. So there's a sample media viewer web part, and what that does is consumes information through the out-of-the-box lists.asmx web service and various other web services. So that means you can create a web part that instead of just having static data, a Silverlight application that instead of just having static data is actually being driven by data that's coming directly from within SharePoint. There are also examples around consuming WCF services. So there are some sample endpoints for WCF services, and that's the example that's around for that is making use of the colleagues functionality within SharePoint to provide a rich experience for finding people within SharePoint. There's also a sample for consuming information for that kind of aggregation type of scenario where you're aggregating content from different places within the site. And there's also navigation controls and custom field type examples. So before, when I was saying you could create a different type of field that had your own user interface, well, there's no reason why that interface can't be Silverlight driven. So let's have a look at this. So I'm going to go back to the same page that I was on before. And we can see that at the bottom we've got this sort of fairly flat, static list of other releases in this area. We want to jazz that up a bit. So I'm going to make use of the I'm going to make use of the media viewer web part that comes with the samples. So I've just clicked to add a new web part to a web part zone at the bottom, and I've got a bunch of web parts available to me. And here I've got 4 of Silverlight web parts that I can use on this page. So I'll start off by just quickly showing you the Hello World sample. So what this has done is embedded a simple static Silverlight application into my page. And that's not doing a great deal. I can save that, and my end users will start seeing that application natively. So there we go. But that's not very clever. We should be able to do something better than that. So I'll just get rid of that. So let's see if we can consume that in a more extensible mechanism. So here we're opening the management interfaces for web parts. We can see that I can say I want a version 2 Silverlight. And the files that are available here map to available ZAP files in my local client bin. So basically this web part just looks in the local client bin and allows you to choose one or more of these applications. So if we just do the Hello Silverlight one, because that's a basic one. Okay, so let's do something a bit cleverer. Here, somewhere, here I've got a SharePoint picture gallery with my available pictures in this area, and I've got a description and a title, and I want to be rendering that within my Silverlight application. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to use the media viewer web part. And here we can see I can select the Silverlight Pictures gallery. I'm looking for things of type picture. This will equally work with movies. And that's pretty much all I need to do. And now if I scroll to the bottom, I've got a much richer Silverlight application. And I can flick between these. I can get the information from the list, from the SharePoint list. And that's natively calling existing web services that come with SharePoint already. So this is nothing special. And it's providing it in a richer format. Okay. So if I just publish that, we should be able to see what that looks like in line. And I can get rid of this title bar and things like that if I need to. So you can see that it's going to be very easy with this tool to start consuming particularly standalone Silverlight applications very quickly. There's no code to do this. There's no you don't have to worry about building stuff that's complicated. And you can extend this by taking a view of that and bringing that into consuming your own custom lists instead of just picture galleries. So just to conclude, what I hope I've shown is that SharePoint is a very flexible web content management system. Certainly from a design point of view, you aren't limited in terms of what you can do. Because it's built on core .NET technologies, your developers should be quickly up to speed on SharePoint. There are a few concepts that they need to get their heads around, but essentially it's using .NET. And you can make use of brand new technologies, like Silverlight, like ASP.NET Ajax, without going off into the wilderness on your own. There's a lot of support out there for you. So as a call to action, please start using the Silverlight blueprint for SharePoint and give us feedback. Tell us where we can improve things, where we can make things easier for you as Silverlight developers and easier for you as SharePoint developers wanting to consume Silverlight within your applications. So, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
How easy is it to integrate SharePoint into other source control environments?
So the question was, how easy is it to integrate SharePoint into other source control environments? So the way that SharePoint works is you've got your page layouts and your master pages, and they're actually within your content database. Similarly, your CSS files are within your content database. But if you choose to deploy those as features, you can extract those files from the database, put them on the file system, and use a deployment technique called features and solutions to push those files onto a SharePoint solution. And that's the best practice way of doing that. Once you've done that, they're then on the file system and can be added to any source control system you want. So there's that intermediate step of getting them out, getting that kind of SharePoint artifact out of SharePoint itself onto the file system, and then it's you can use TFS or SourceForge or whatever, or CSV, CVS even. So yeah. I mean, there is guidance out there for doing that. Yeah.
I actually have two questions. In one of your initial slides, you said you had 2 developers and 1 PM working on the Head Candy project. Was that a typical work week to implement that, or was that 360 hours?
No, that was. So just to put it in context, that was in beta 2 days. There was no documentation. There was very little guidance out there in terms of blogs and best practice guidance and stuff like that. Actually, most of the time was spent in design, not in dev. To actually put this together was probably only 2 weeks of that 8-week block. Once we'd sort of put the framework down, we'd defined what our content types were, which page layouts we needed, we'd done our IA, and we'd done our design and got HTML mock-ups of those. Actually implementing that in SharePoint was quite quick.
Okay. My second question was, how many business people did you involve to get that launched?
Right, so there was a content owner of the system. There were also other key stakeholders who needed to do that, and the content owner had additional resources within her team who provided content for that, but they used the content editing interfaces. So it really comes down to how much content you've got, how much content you're automatically migrating in versus creating from scratch. Most of this was a create from scratch exercise because it was a brand new website. But again, I mean, it was start to finish in 8 weeks. It's not a very big site, so I mean, I've got a site at the moment which is just going through final testing, where they've been putting content together for 6 months, but that's got 30,000 pages on it. So, sure, it's going to take longer.
Thank you.
So you said at the beginning that there were no limitations for the designers to do SharePoint websites. I'm wondering, I saw in all of your examples that you had one tree of navigations. Can you have multiple navigation
absolutely.
trees? And then how do you apply master pages to tree nodes?
Right, yeah.
So that a content owner can choose to create a new navigation item and then choose what type of page that is.
Sure. Okay. So to answer the second question first, when I went into the master page and changed that in that first example, that was at the root of the site, and that changed everything beneath that. But each node of the site can choose to either inherit from the master page of the parent site, or I can choose a completely different one. So if you wanted to have a different design for, say, a microsite, one approach would be to just change the master page for that subsite. You can also assign custom CSS to individual nodes within your tree. And that's at the bottom of this page, where you can provide an alternative CSS for just this area. And that will be automatically put into your pages when people browse pages within that subsite. It will automatically have that alternate CSS file. And if you decide to move a page from area to area using the site manage content and structure tool, where you can go in and say, look at the pages here and say, I want to move that, or I can't move this because it's a default page, but you can move it to another area. It will pick up the master page and custom CSS from its parent, from its new parent, so it follows that way.
Basically, my question comes from if you want to do 3 divisions of types of users in a website. So you have the branding people, the communications department that is telling you the guidelines of what each section of the website should look like.
Yeah.
Then you have the developers and administrators of SharePoint, which are obviously going to be using this. And then you have the owners of the content. And maybe you want to give them the ability to be able to create pages within. So I don't want my users to see this. I just want them to be able to add a new page.
You can absolutely lock that down. You can define. If I just go back to this area here. So you can define who has access to what and at what level. So we can see that we've got members, visitors, owners. So members can modify information in that site. Visitors can read information but can't modify it. Owners can approve stuff for publication. They're basically a super user for that. Designers, so you can say someone can open a page layout in SharePoint Designer, but they can't change the content. Hierarchy managers, they can see the site content and structure and they can create sub-sites, but they can't change the content on those. So it's very flexible in terms of its security model. You can absolutely define that. And the whole interface is security trimmed. So if you don't have access to edit the page, you don't see the edit the page button. You can't edit it. And even if you try and fudge the URL, it won't work. So yeah, you can. So, and the automatic navigation is also security trimmed. So if you don't have access, if you want to say create a members only area, you just don't allow anonymous access to that area, or you don't allow certain types of user to that area. So you can restrict access that way as well. Sorry.
Related to the source control question, what can you say about life cycle management of the site?
Right.
This is all good for day-to-day stuff, but if you introduce a whole section,
Yeah.
have to protect whatnot.
Yeah. So the question's about software lifecycle management. I did a talk earlier this week at SharePoint conference on software lifecycle management and automatic builds. Basically, you can do it. There is guidance starting to come out on how to do that. There are tools coming out that enable you to do that in a cleaner way. Out of the box, the original version of SharePoint 2007, I'll be honest, the tools weren't that great for doing that kind of development. They hadn't really thought through the implication of people doing formal dev, build, test, UAT, content staging, production, and managing content versus infrastructure versus other types of asset that you don't want content authors changing. So that for the last year and a half has been a bit weak, but it's getting much, much stronger as more tools come out. And I know that the product team are working on that quite aggressively. Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit on how difficult it was to integrate the ASP.NET Standard membership provider for the public-facing site? And also, how do you restrict access to certain areas of the site for the public users that are using the ASP.NET membership provider? How do you integrate the two authentication mechanisms?
Right. So that's two questions. That's authentication and authorization. So the authentication piece, the getting the ASP.NET membership providers in place, it's the same way you would in, I just opened this in Visual Studio. It's the same way that you would in any other ASP.NET application. You have to provide a block of configuration. Down here, so have I gone past it? Yeah, so you have to provide your membership provider. We've got a custom one, but that's because we had certain business rules that we had to follow. But you could use the out-of-the-box ASP SQL membership provider or the Windows membership provider if you wanted to tie it back to AD accounts. The role provider is really important. If you don't have a role provider, you can't easily match groups of users to security permissions. So a role in a ASP.NET role provider model is equivalent to a group within SharePoint. And that's actually also equivalent to an AD group. So it's sort of it all works in the same way. So basically you make sure that your users are a member of a role, and then you assign permissions to that role, and the users within that role will have those permissions on SharePoint.
Inside SharePoint, you see groups of, say, ASP.NET membership users.
Yeah.
That's a role. That's a group inside your AD structure for SharePoint. Is that right?
No. No, this is native SharePoint groups, not AD groups. I mean, you could put them in. You could put the role into an AD group, and then, but you don't need to. In terms of actually configuring, so the first bit is you need the web config settings. The second bit, I haven't fired this up today, so this web will take a bit of time to load. The second one, the second part of it is you need to go to the membership, to the authentication provider within Central Admin, and set that you want Forms Auth, not Windows Auth. So I haven't actually got the content, the membership database on my computer for obvious reasons. So you go here and you choose which web application you want to you want to set, and you say, I want this to be a forms auth site, and you give it the membership provider and role manager name, and away you go. So there's white papers and lots of blogs with step-by-step guides on exactly how to do that. Okay.
In order to achieve DDA or Section 508 compliance,
Right.
I need to have total control over the HTML that's out.
Yeah.
But am I right in saying that the combination of the master page that I define and whatever code I put into my individual web parts, I have total control over what's delivered to the client? Or does the system kind of insert other bits that I wouldn't really want?
Right. That you have total control, but you have to be aware of certain mechanisms that you need to change.
Okay.
So there's some out-of-the-box web parts that don't provide valid XHTML. In fact, many of them don't. There's lots of web parts that don't provide valid WCAG 1, let alone WCAG 2 support. So there are a number of ways around that. You either don't use web parts, and to be honest, on a public-facing website, you're probably not going to be using that many web parts. I mean, we use like 4 or something like that. So, changing those web parts to produce more valid code is a manageable task. In terms of the overall structure of your HTML page, you do have total control over that. You're just writing a master page. If you are interested in this, there's an initiative that's been run by Microsoft called the Accessibility Kit for SharePoint. And they've just this week released version 1.1 of that. And that's basically, it's not a flick the switch and your site's accessible. That's not going to work. What you need to do is make use of the extensive guidance and tools that come with that kit to provide mechanisms for training your developers and your authors to creating accessible content and structure. But also there are some control adapters which you can apply to your site which will strip out some particularly nasty and badly accessible bits of code. It's nowhere near as bad as it was with SharePoint 2003, because SharePoint 2003 was so difficult to customize the look and feel for, whereas SharePoint 2007, it's all master pages, it's all much easier and all supported, so it should be fine.
And if you don't mind a second question,
That's fine.
I understand that MOS gives you much greater flexibility in terms of scalability, but
Yeah.
can you point out anything in your demonstration today that required MOS over WSS?
Yes, all of the web content management features are a MOS feature, not a WSS feature.
Okay.
So if you want the rich inline editing experience, if you want the workflows, if you want all of pretty much everything I showed you was pure MOS, not WSS. You'll also need a particular license type called MOS for Internet Services, which is basically a CAL-free version of the SKU. So it's functionally the same as the Enterprise Edition, but you don't have to get individual licenses for each person visiting the site for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question related to WSS. We are planning to implement SharePoint for document management.
Yeah.
We just want it for intranet. What are the main differences between WSS versus the SharePoint server that we should consider?
So WSS has collaboration features, so team sites, wikis, blogs, that kind of discussion forums. It's got a basic search, which can be enhanced by using Search Server 2008, which is basically the enterprise search features of MOS in a box on its own. That's free if you get the Express edition. Workflow you get because it's Windows Workflow Foundation, so you get that absolutely.
Is there a user limit?
No user limit. You don't even have to buy CALs for it. I mean, obviously your your end users will need
Windows.
whatever licenses they need to run Windows.
Right. What about subsites?
No limits there. I mean, there are limits to the framework that, for performance reasons, you shouldn't have, more than 2,000 subsites at the same level. For example, there's white papers on capacity
One other
planning.
question I had was about how the documents are saved. I know that you mentioned that SQL Server is what you use as a backend.
Yeah.
But for Excel sheets and PDFs and everything, where are they saved?
They're all in the database, yeah?
So that means
style sheets, master pages, PDFs, movie files, everything's in the database.
Is there an option to save in the file system or some other system?
I mean, it's a WebDAV-enabled source, so you could connect to it through the file system. You could map a drive to it, for example. But then you lose some of the collaboration features. Really what you want to be doing is opening stuff from within Word or Excel 2007 and pulling stuff directly from there. People should start moving away from the file system because it's not extensible.
No, I guess the main reason is so that the same document can be opened from like a CRM system or something else. So it's not just SharePoint should not be owning the document, and that's my main concern. Can we do that?
Right. So if the document's not document's not actually, you don't want that in the repository, sure, you can just provide a UNC path instead of. So that would be in another system. So you wouldn't have in your document library, you wouldn't have the actual file. You just have a path to that file.
Okay, thank you.
Do the Silverlight web parts that you showed respect the permission model? Like the content query web part would allow
Yes,
you to
absolutely.
aggregate stuff together. And
Yeah.
so if I wanted to build a Silverlight news feed that pulled from a bunch of subsites with different permissions, it would trim?
Yes.
Automatically?
Because the web service trims, and it's just consuming that web service. So it's just using the lists out-of-the-box web service, and that trims.
Can I ask if what designer system do you happen to use? The SharePoint designer, having descended from front page, is not particularly CSS friendly.
It's better than front page.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But what all do you use? Is there anything? Is there any way you can use Expression Web?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you can absolutely build your flat HTML pages from your design using Expression Web. To get you like the 95% of the way there. To actually build master pages and page layouts, unless you really know what you're doing, you should be using SharePoint Designer. SharePoint Designer does have some quirks. It suffers from the same thing that many editors, WYSIWYG editors have, which is randomly inserting bits of HTML into your nice clean HTML, which is slightly annoying. But you can configure it to not do that. So it's a case of trying to do that. And don't forget that Expression Web and SharePoint Designer are the same product. Yeah, under the hood they're the same. You fire the two of them up, they look identical. They've got the same framework running. They've just got slightly different menu options and a different splash screen, and that's it. They're the same product apart from that. So, yeah.
How you doing? How's performance? Do you have any problems there? And also, is there any way to fix up the URL so you could hide the page library or something?
Right, so I'll tackle performance first. This is an enterprise level thing. I mean, this can scale to pretty much unlimited resources. You need to scale out your hardware. So that's one of the reasons why all of the assets are in the database, not permanently on the file system. So that means you can have, you can start off small. You can have a couple of web front-end servers, a sort of application server, and a couple of back-end database servers. But you can add to any one of those tiers and expand out. So you can have 40 web servers if you really wanted to. and it would manage that without any problems at all. It uses extensive caching. I didn't really talk about the caching mechanism, but I'm out of time. I'll be around outside. So yeah.
Every request doesn't hit the database.
Yeah, absolutely. No, if every request hit the database, it would absolutely tank performance. So what was your other question?
URLs.
Your fix up of URLs. Not in a supported way. You can do it, but it's not supported. Basically, it's a HTTP module to rewrite the URL on the way out, but it's not supported.